Today we're going to be able to summarize a story by telling the most important parts. Okay, so you already read The Champion of Quiet, so we're going to be talking about the story some more today. So we have a copy that's already gisted. It's going to be your job now to place the conflicts within the story where the conflict is, the solution triangle where the solution is in the story, and the star where the character Maggie ends up changing. So let's think about this for a minute. Let's see what's happening with the character. Okay, so we know the main character is Maggie, so let's think what her conflict is. What's Maggie's conflict or problem within the story? So Maggie's problem is that she's always picked last for gym class, so she hates gym. Is there any character influencers that are influencing her to feel that way? Well, her classmates are influencing her in a negative way because they're always picking her last. And that's making her hate gym class and not enjoying it. Now let's think how she solves her problem or her conflict. So she solves her problem by raising her hand and volunteering to be the team leader. Now let's think, were there any influencers or character influencers that influenced her to change and to volunteer and be brave and raise her hand? So Jasmine influenced her in a positive way because when she looked at Jasmine, she remembered that Jasmine's also always picked last. So she got the idea that she's going to volunteer to be the team captain so her and Jasmine don't have to be picked last again. Lastly, you're going to put the star where the character changes. So let's think. In the beginning, Maggie's very shy and quiet. And then at the end, she becomes brave. She raises her hand and she volunteers and she finally finds her voice and speaks up. And she changes as a character. So when you find that spot in the story, that's where you're going to put the star. Now we're just going to review the elements of plot. Okay, so we start with our exposition. Exposition is the beginning of the story, similar to an introduction where the character and the setting are introduced. Okay, after the exposition and we find the character and the setting, we move right into the rising action. So that's the part of the story that the suspense starts to build up and it leads us to our climax. Before we get to our climax though, we're going to come across our conflict and that's going to happen during the rising action. So sometime during the rising action, usually in the middle, is where we come across our conflict. Then at the end of our rising action, we finally come across our climax, which is the part of the story where the character finally faces its conflict head on, and it's that turning point of the story. After the climax, the character usually changes, so that's where we're going to find our star, because the character has to face its conflict and overcome it before the character can change. During the character change, we are in the falling action. So right after the climax is the falling action. And during the falling action is where we'll find the character change. During the falling action, we'll also find our solution. So how the character solves the problem. Okay. At the end of the falling action, we're going to transition into our resolution. And that's the part of the story where all those loose ends get tied up. And that's the part where we'll find our theme, usually at the end of the story, where that lesson's learned. Okay, so now on your own today, you're going to drop the somebody, wanted, but, so, then on the plot diagram, and that's going to be what you're going to do independently. So now I'm going to show you where they should go. Okay, when we hear the word somebody and we're thinking about retelling a story, we start with somebody, and that's the main character. So that's going to happen in the exposition because, like I said earlier, the exposition introduces us to the main character in the setting. So somebody, that's going to be the exposition. What you wanted, so her conflict. What was her conflict? But what's happening? So that's part of our rising action after the conflict. In between her conflict and the climax when she finally faces her conflict head on. So what does she decide to do? So that's our climax. And then we have our falling action or resolution. depending on the story. This before, when we are retelling a story or summarizing a story, we use somebody, wanted, but, so, then. So we start with somebody. So who is the main character? Wanted. What does the main character want or want to do? But what is the conflict? Why can't the main character get what he or she wants? So, how does the main character solve the conflict? Then what was the resolution? How was that solved? Okay, so here we have, somebody, Maggie. So Maggie is a new student in her school, because they were just summing up quickly the exposition in the beginning. So now we know Maggie's main character takes place at school. What did Maggie want? Maggie wanted it to be any other day besides Tuesday, which meant that she had gym class and would be picked last. But so now we're in the rising action. But Maggie knew what was coming and was considered the champion of quiet. So now we're at the climax, that really important part of the story, that turning point. So Maggie decides to raise her hand and volunteer to become team captain. Then Maggie picks Jasmine and other students who are usually picked last and ends up leaving gym class with new friends. So that's our ending of our story, our resolution. Okay, so now you're going to answer these questions on your own. Which detail from the story is the most important to include in the summary of a story? So when you see the most important to include in summary of the story, automatically you need to think conflict. So now you're just going to decide which of these choices, A, B, C, or D, was the conflict within the story. Okay, so you're going to put an X next to the choices that were incorrect, and you're going to circle. So for example, if you think that it's C, you would circle C and put an X next to D. Okay, as you go through the choices, you're going to write. If you think that it's not this, you'll write no. If you think that it's this, you'll write yes. You would write no, no. Okay, so make sure you're going to read each choice. If you think that it's a possibility, and you think that, oh, maybe it's A or D, you can write maybe, and then you're going to go back to it, and you need to eventually pick one by dragging the circle and writing yes. And then you'll write no in the other boxes. Okay, so you're going to complete this question on your own as well. So when you're reading the question, you're going to circle where you need to go in the text to reread. So for example, it says, after reading the passage, answer the questions below. Read this sentence from paragraph 1. So you always want to circle that paragraph 1 because it tells you what paragraph to go back in when you need to reread. Highlight key pieces of the information, like who or what the question is about. So we highlighted that it says, what does the sentence show about Miss Ann Spencer? So we highlighted Miss Ann Spencer because the question's about her. We circled the word reveal because we know that reveal also means to show. So what does the sentence show about Miss Ann Spencer? And it says replace words that will help me understand the question. So like I said, we know reveal means show, so we wrote that above it. So then you're going to cross off your choices that you think it's definitely not, just like we did previously. And you will write in the boxes no, 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 or yes. When you think reveal or show, you're thinking what type of character is Miss Ann. So what type of person is Miss Ann Spencer? And that's going to be your best choice.